Okay, folks, here we are back again. Lilith theory once again. And we're going to continue on this. Tonight, we're going to talk about why Azazel, which remember Azazel is used in the Yom Kippur ceremony, and why Azazel is considered the progeny of Lilith. And these are going to be taken from the Zohar. So admittedly, while the Yahad does not accept the Zohar as authoritative, it's interesting to see what correlations the Jews have and what they believe, at the very least. And this has been quite a long series. As you can see in my book, I'm about 67% through this book. Welcome, Lori. Let's see. Welcome, everyone. We are continuing through this. And essentially what this class series is about is an explanation for why the high priest would lay his hands upon the scapegoat and pronounce a very specific formula. And he would literally say, Le Azazel. And what that means is for Azazel. So the scapegoat in the Yom Kippur ceremony was literally all of the sins of Israel were transferred onto the scapegoat for Azazel. So who is this Azazel character, and what resources do we have available to us today to discover how this has connection to basically these the Yom Kippur ceremony, the bitter water ceremony in Numbers, the golden calf incident, and it has connection to what was the other one we talked about? It'll probably show up here a little more. So these are taken from sections of a Jewish mystical book, which, as I said, we do not consider authoritative. They are simply for academic purposes. We are looking to see what the works of the Jews say about Lilith. That's it, okay? So please don't think as we're reading through this that this is the Zohar is authoritative to us. It's not. Okay, so what is the Zohar? The Zohar is one ancient work that most firmly establishes the identity of Azazel as the seed of Lilith. As we have seen in our discussion on Lilith, the Zohar is a collection of Kabbalistic midrashes. These are commentaries on the Torah. And as such, the Zohar largely defines Kabbalistic beliefs. In the Zohar, Azazel is nearly as prevalent as Lilith. Zohar mentions him by name in 19 separate passages and by indirect reference 9 more times for a total 28 references. So I should state that the Talmudic works of the Jews have a lot to say about this figure that the Bible tells us that the high priest would pronounce on the scapegoat. And so I think there is some legitimacy here. Also consider that in the book of Enoch, that the Ethiopian Orthodox Church regards as canon, Azazel also shows up a couple times. One of the things that Azazel does that we have learned before is that he teaches mankind many different kinds of skill sets which are designed to cause destruction. Number one, he teaches them war. He teaches them how to make deadly weapons. Azazel is responsible in the Jewish mindset for how war came to mankind. And so he's regarded in the narrative, heaven regards him very negatively because he has a big part in causing the destruction of mankind. And so there's 28 references in these Jewish works. So this is in comparison to Lilith, which the Zohar mentions by name in 27 separate passages, by indirect reference in a further 29 of a total of 56 direct references. And also, I should note that in the Bible, Lilith is mentioned by name once in the book of Isaiah. I think it's chapter 28. The King James renders it the screech owl. And there's other translations that render it a night demoness. So it is mentioned by name, and so it does bear some, at least some examination, and which is the purpose of this series. As we have already seen, the Zohar's commentary on Lilith is consistent with her being the first created woman with Adam from the ground, who became the serpent of the garden upon rebelling against Adam and Elohim. And as we shall see, the Zohar's passages on Azazel are consistent with him being Lilith's firstborn seed. The most important passage of the Zohar establishing Azazel as the seed of Lilith comes in Vayetze. Now, Vayetze, if you're familiar with the Torah Parshas system, Vayetze is one of those Parshas. Okay, so I recognize these names quite well because, you know, I went through several years of Torah Parsha training, and Vayetze is in there. So the passage is a bit difficult to understand on first reading, as the Zohar is a highly mystical work, which is difficult to comprehend for outsiders unschooled in its principles. However, a little study reveals its message. Vayetze, this is in 116, volume 9, and Yaakov went to Beersheba. So this is what's in there. Let me make sure we've got this recording. Yep, we are. Last time somehow I missed the recording in midweek manna. All right, so from the north side, the grade spread until the dross of gold reached down to Berea, Yetsiria, and Asiya of the unholy side. The unholy filth grasped the male above and the female below. Here, male and female joined together. They are the rider on the serpent. And the serpent, which is the secret of the male and female, this is the secret of Azazel, which includes the male and female of defilement. So what is he talking about here? Essentially, when we read in Genesis chapter 1, when it says Elohim made them in his image, man, the word is ha-adam, ha-adamah, okay? And it's like from the earth. And then in the second chapter, it's a different concept. It says that Yahweh took Eve from Adam's side, took a rib from his side and fashioned her. See? Whereas chapter 1, it literally says Yahweh made from Adam, from the earth, male and female. And so this is where the understanding of the theory comes from, that Lilith is in the picture before Eve. And Lilith then is disobedient and becomes a demoness. So that's essentially what this is going into. And it explains Azazel in a certain way. All right, so Vayetze 1:16 states that the secret of Azazel is that he is the unholy filth, and who is joined together, that's Samael, the male rider of the serpent, with the female serpent. Now, I remember before I said that Samael may be a picture of Lucifer. And there's some kind of in the mystical works, there's some kind of amalgamation. It's almost like the anti-Messiah. When you think of the concepts of the anti-Messiah, you know, if you ever read the Left Behind series, or you watch the movies, now necessarily I don't subscribe to pre-tribulation rapture, but there is an interesting part in there. It literally talks about this man who becomes he comes to prominent center stage in world affairs. He takes control, and he's literally inhabited by Satan's spirit. And immediately he goes out to persecute the saints of Elohim and cause horrific destruction on the earth. So that's in that movie series. Well, this is kind of the idea of Samael as a spirit melding with this creature that's known as Lilith. And she's also known as the serpent. Azazel grasps hold the male aspect of Samael and joins it together within himself with the aspect of the female serpent. Well, this could be in reference to Azazel being the progeny of Lilith and Samael, because the earlier narratives seem to suggest that Samael, being one of the fallen angels, or even Satan himself, had relations with Lilith and produced Azazel. We already see that the female serpent is Lilith and the male rider is the spirit of Samael. Calling Azazel unholy filth suggests he is derived from a sexual act between Samael and the serpent. The serpent would be in woman form. Understand that her form apparently was human form before she. It actually, in some of the mystical works, it literally says that she, took upon her aspects of like angelic aspects, like wings and so on, when she disobeyed Elohim, and she called out. She had the knowledge of the ineffable name of Elohim, which, like Yahweh, she called that out. And then wings sprouted. These are all in various kinds of mystical works, and I don't put any stock in them necessarily, but I'm trying to give some background here so that as we continue forward in this narrative. And the Zohar, filth is used to describe the defiling semen of Samael and or the serpent. For example, Akare Mot below accuses the serpent of casting filth, semen or defiled lineage into Eve, causing her to conceive Cain. Now, I don't think that's legit. I think that's just Jewish. They came up with this in order to justify their ultra patriarchal view of descendants of Eve. In other words, their subjection of women. That's my thought on that. But so when I'm going through this stuff, just take this with a very serious grain of salt. And realize that we're just trying to glean aspects of this Azazel character and then compare them to Scripture and also the Book of Enoch. Okay, so this is repeated in 203 and several other passages. When Vayetze 1:16 says Azazel is the unholy filth in which the serpent and her rider Samael are joined together, this implies he is the seed of their union, just as the DNA and physical characteristics of a human father and mother are joined together in their seed. So too is Azazel the focal point of the joining of the characteristics of the serpent Lilith and her rider Samael. Note that Akare, now that's another Torah portion right there. Akare, I recognize that. 359 states that both Adam and Eve sired demons from the serpent Lilith. This is possible because of the dual sexual nature of the serpent. Okay, so this is just, what the Jews are saying here. We have learned that when Adam descended with the supernal image, a holy form, and those on high and below saw him, they approached him and crowned him ruler over this world. Later, when the serpent came unto Eve, it injected its filth into her. Now, this could be literally, this is what the Jews believed the apple was. That when Eve partook of this, Lilith imparted something to her that caused her to fall, that caused her to lose her holy nature. Following this, she gave birth to Cain. She delivered Cain from the filth of the serpent. From that genealogy were the subsequent generations of the world's evildoers, and the habitations of demons and spirits come from there and his side. For this reason, all spirits and demons in the world are partly of people below and partly of the angels on high, as they are half born from the filth of the serpent upon it which the angel Samael rode. Therefore, half stem from the angels, other half is human, because they were born from Cain, who was human. These other demons born from Adam through two female spirits, as mentioned above, are all similar, as they stem half from below and half from above. So there's a lot of gobbledygook in there. But I think what it's trying to establish is basically this idea of Samael being the progeny of Lilith. Okay, so this is in Pekudai. After Adam and his wife sinned, the serpent had intercourse with Eve and injected filth into her. Eve bore Cain. He had the shape from above and from below, and the secret of the filth of the other side. And from the side below, the external forces. Therefore, he was first to bring death into the world, caused by his side as it came of the filth of the serpent. The nature of the serpent is to lurk so as to kill, and his issue, Cain, learned his ways. And so it is written, it came to pass when they were in the field that Cain rose up against Abel, his brother, and slew him. So the mystical Jews, they understand that it was more than just Cain deciding that this was his nature that was imparted into him to be a murderer. Many of the other mentions of Azazel in the Zohar concerning his role in the Yom Kippur ceremony, some of the more noteworthy passages that confirm assertions in the previous sections about Azazel's role in the ceremony are as follows. Zob 42 confirms the notion that the goat to Azazel is a rejected sacrifice. This would be the Yom Kippur ceremony. That is unable to rise to Jehovah as an atonement. It cannot rise because it is burdened by all the sins of Israel heaped upon it. This goat carries away Israel's sins. The passage also equates the ceremony's goat to Yahweh, the accepted sacrifice to the perfect man. This confirms the archetype of Messiah in the goat of Jehovah. Now, that's something I never considered before. That is an interesting concept there. Very interesting. Okay, Pincus 681, Pincus is another Torah portion, confirms that in the goat to Azazel, Samael is separated from everything and bears all the transgressions of Israel upon him. Yahweh is said to be forgiving, bearing iniquity, meaning that he temporarily bears the burden of sin so that he might remove it utterly from Israel and place it upon Azazel, upon whom it shall be forevermore. This confirms the previously laid out notion of the Yom Kippur ceremony that Azazel is the seed of the serpent in rivalry with Messiah. So remember that the Bible in Genesis talks about the generations of the earth and the generations of the heaven. The idea is that the generations of the heaven are corrupted generations. They're corrupted, and that part of this is the progeny of Lilith and Samael, one of the 200 fallen angels, according to the book of Lilith, that came down about Mount Hermon, made a pact and said, we're going to disobey God. We're going to go together and we're going to have relations with human women and produce our own children. Okay. And Jude talks about this. He says that they left their heavenly estate and they're now bound in chains, waiting the judgment. They're now under the earth, bound in chains, waiting the judgment. The Apostle Jude literally says that in the New Testament. So that's what that's about. All right, so as we continue on, we're going to look at this summary list of evidences that Azazel was Lilith's firstborn seed of the Watchers. Do we have any comments? I can open up to comments if people have comments or anything. Some of this is a bit far-fetched, but just kind of bear with it and just see what you can glean off of it. I'm not sure I agree with the Jews on this Cain issue here, but they're probably trying to explain how it is that somebody so young in creation could turn bad so quickly and murder his brother. The Jews they may have just come up with reasonings, and that's not necessarily the truth. It may not have any connection there. Okay, so let's look at the summary list of evidences that Azazel was Lilith's firstborn seed with the Watchers. Below, I have compiled 20 evidences from 1st Enoch, the Book of the Giants, Leviticus 15, and the Zohar that Azazel was not a Watcher, but rather the firstborn seed of the serpent Lilith with the Watchers. Okay, so remember, in the Book of Enoch, it says the Watchers came down to Mount Hermon. This is recounted in the book of Genesis, chapter 6, when it says the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were fair and went in unto them and produced the race of the giants. That literally says that in Genesis. So the book of Enoch of Ethiopian Orthodox Church, they consider it as canon. It greatly expands on this. Whereas in Genesis, it only dedicates like 1 or 2 verses. to this incredibly momentous event. The book of Enoch goes into great detail about what happened here. So here's the evidences. First, Enoch never explicitly states that Azazel is a watcher or an angel. Samjaza, mating with Lilith, provides an explanation for the mysterious sin Samjaza must commit and the strange oaths he extracts from the other watchers atop Mount Hermon in 1 Enoch 6:3. This is especially valid when one considers the anti-parallels of the events with the legend of Ashtoreth. Look at that. So have you ever wondered what is the progenitor of, in the narrative of like Ashtoreth, like Easter, like, any kind of female fertility goddess? And it connects to, the far left, far liberal, far left female movement today. They venerate Lilith. They venerate Ashtoreth. It's like goddess worship coming back again in our modern time. This basically, all of this connects back to the understanding theory of Lilith. And now continue on in 1 Enoch 6:7. Azazel is not listed as one of the original leaders of the Watchers before their fornications with women. Okay, all right. In 1 Enoch 8:1-2, immediately following the Watchers' sexual relations with women, Azazel is listed as the foremost figure in the Watchers' sin. Azazel, being a Watcher, cannot explain his sudden prominent appearance, but being a seed of the Watchers can. 1 Enoch 10:8 ascribes all the sin of the Watchers' crimes to Azazel. This is not consistent for a Watcher who was not even present at the start of the Watchers' downfall. However, this is consistent with Azazel's role in the Bible's Yom Kippur ceremony, which identifies him as the infamous seed of Eden's serpent, Lilith, upon whom are placed all the sins of Israel. Now, I think some of you may have seen the, I should mention that there is a stone carving that one of these famous artists, I'm not sure if it was Michelangelo or one of them that created, but literally shows a tree. It shows the tree, and apparently it's a picture of the knowledge of the good of evil, which had the fruit that was forbidden for Adam and Eve to partake of. And it shows a serpent wrapped around the trunk of that tree, and then is a woman's figure, and she has like a snake tongue, and she's like whispering to Eve. So Eve's here, and then Adam, and Eve is handing Adam an apple. Okay, so this is created in the Middle Ages. So these concepts were even understood by some in the Catholic Church. Very interesting. Okay, so in 1 Enoch 9:6, Azazel is testified against by Yahweh's angels first and separated from Samjaza and his associates. In the next two verses, this implies Azazel is not an associate. It's not associated of Samjaza, which is a watcher. This also implies Azazel is not under the authority of Samjaza, who the next verse reminds us is the leader of the watchers. Thus, Azazel cannot be a watcher, and his sin is again more prominent than the watchers. Okay, so to understand this a little better, it would be good for you to get the Book of Enoch and read it. Make sure you get the book 1 that the Ethiopian Orthodox Church holds. But that goes into detail more on that. So most of the people that are in these classes have read that already, and so that gives you some background. In 1 Enoch 9:6, the angels do not accuse Azazel of fornication with the daughters of man, but Samjaza. Let's see, we got a comment there. Yeah, Enoch, Lori. Enoch 1, make sure you get the Ethiopian variant of Enoch 1, okay? And that's important to get if you want to understand the background for a lot of this information. It's held as canon. It's considered inspired in the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, okay? Okay, so Azazel is merely blamed for instructing man in unrighteousness. Remember how I said that Azazel taught mankind how to make war, how to use metallurgy and make weapons, very destructive weapons, and so on. Okay. So this is consistent with Azazel not being an angel or watcher, since all watchers pledged by solemn oath upon Mount Hermon to go unto the daughters of man. Note that if Azazel was the seed of the watchers and had sexual relationships with women, he still would not have been accused of this act by the angels, because any seed of the watchers would not be under any heavenly prohibition as their fathers were. Right. Okay, so in 1 Enoch 10, 4-6, the angels punish Azazel before the watchers, along with the watchers' own seed. This early punishment is consistent with him being the seed of the watchers. A key element to the watchers' punishment was to witness the demise of all their seed. Okay, so in 1 Enoch 10, 4-6, Azazel's special and heavy punishment, being first before all other seed of the watchers, is consistent with him being a firstborn seed of the watchers. So in 1 Enoch 10, 4-6, Azazel being the first punishment precludes him from being a watcher. He would not be able to witness the demise of his seed per the judgment laid out against the watchers. So what was the judgment against the watcher's seed? What happened to all the giants before the flood? What happened to all of these natural aberrations? Well, they were wiped out by the flood. And only 8 souls were saved alive on the ark. Noah and his sons and their wives. 8 souls were saved alive on the ark. That's what the Bible says. So all of these giants, all of these creatures before the flood, they were destroyed by the mighty flood. And if they had not been destroyed, the very line of Messiah would have been threatened. So that's important to understand here. All right, so 11, 1 Enoch 10, 6-7 states that when Azazel is cast into the lake of fire, this will heal the earth of the angels' corruption upon it. The angels' corruption upon the earth is their Nephilim seed. Remember, Nephal in Hebrew means to fall upon violently. And according to various sources, the giants were very violent, and they caused great destruction in the land before the flood. Okay, so let's see, where was I? This again suggests Azazel is the foremost seed of the watchers. Okay, number 12. In 1 Enoch 10:8, Azazel is once again not accused of fornication with the daughters of man, but Samjaza and his associates are in just a few verses. Now that's in Genesis chapter 6, where it says the sons of God, they came down and they saw the daughters of men were attractive, and they went unto them. They had sexual relations with them and produced the race of the giants. So Azazel is also accused of teaching man unrighteousness. Okay, so 13. In 1 Enoch 10:9, Azazel suffers an individual punishment at the hand of an angel who is different from the one commissioned to punish all the watchers' seed of fornication. This fornication is specifically the sexual act of the watchers with the daughters of Adam. Note that given Azazel is a seed of the watchers, his not being included in this category suggests Azazel's mother was not a daughter of Adam. Very interesting point there. So who was Azazel's mother? Well, in this theory, it's Lilith, in which case she could only be Lilith. Okay, so number 14. In 1 Enoch 10:11, Azazel is again not included with Semjaza and his associates. This again applies Azazel is not a watcher. All right, in 1 Enoch 13:1, when Enoch is commanded by Elohim to confront the fallen watchers and their seed, Enoch confronts Azazel separately and first from the Semjaza and his fellow watchers. Interesting. Enoch confronts Azazel separately, separated from Semjaza and the 200 watchers that came down to Mount Hermon to make that evil pact. Verse 16, in 1 Enoch 13:1-2, Enoch does not charge Azazel with the sin of having sexual relations with women, as Yahweh earlier commanded Enoch to do to the watchers on his mission. Rather, Enoch accuses Azazel only of teaching man unrighteousness. This is consistent with Azazel not being a transgressing watcher. So I think about this for a minute. The high priest puts his hands upon the scapegoat during the Yom Kippur ceremony, says Le'azazel. So all that is evil of mankind, war, sexual sin, being out of order, the family being out of order, all of this is ascribed to the teachings of Azazel, right? All right, so in 1 Enoch 13:3, Azazel is not present at a gathering where all the watchers are said to be present. 18, in the fragment from the Dead Sea Scrolls, Book of the Giants, Azazel is treated as a peer to the Nephilim seed of the Watchers. That's because he's like a half-brother to them, right? He's a half-brother. The fragment implies that Azazel's lineage is more polluted and deserving of punishment than the giant's lineage, which was the product of Watchers mating with the daughters of Adam. From this, it may be inferred that Azazel's lineage was the product of Lilith mating with the Watchers. Okay, so number 19, this comes from Vayetz, which is another Torah portion of the Zohar, indicates that the secret of Azazel is that he is the unholy filth in whom is joined together the male rider with the female serpent Lilith. In other words, he is the progeny of Lilith in this unholy union with Samael. That's what it's saying there. Unholy filth suggests the result of sexual acts. This indicates that Azazel is the resulting seed of the serpent, Lilith mating a male inseminating spirit. Because essentially that's what happens. A spirit, literally, when a woman gets pregnant, a spirit is formed, or as some teach, a spirit is called from the general grouping of spirits and imparted. In other words, it's allotted. That gets into a really heady discussion on whether spirits are actually created or whether they are drawn in the impregnation process. But I won't digress on that. Azazel's role in Yom Kippur ceremony, Leviticus 16, indicates he is the serpent's infamous seed. This is because of the parallelism between the Yom Kippur ceremony and the bitter water trial of the Sota, of whom the first archetype was the serpent Lilith. So remember, in many of my other discussions on this topic, we talked in great detail about the Book of Numbers and this very strange ceremony where a man has a wife and he begins to have jealousy come over him, and he thinks that his wife has stepped out on him somewhere, and he doesn't really have proof, but he becomes insanely jealous against her. And so literally the Bible gives a a formula for dealing with this problem. Okay, what he does is he drags his wife to the high priest or to one of the priests, probably an underling, and says, "Look, this woman has committed adultery against me, but I don't have the proof, and so I want her to undergo the bitter water trial." Imagine that. Imagine the shame that poor woman would be under. Of course, she was guilty. She would be trying to hide her sin, and so she might have been a little scared. But if you remember in the Book of Numbers, it talks about how there's this elaborate trial where she's drinking this. She takes two of these drinks during a ceremony, and if this woman is innocent, she gets rewarded by having a child. If she's guilty, she ends up having a horrible disease in her belly, and the implication is she dies. Okay, so it's a very mystical, it's a very, it's almost, there's a lot of power released in it in some way, and I never quite understood it until I got into these studies. But this really does explain that bitter water trial in the Book of Numbers. All right, so now we're on another section, the return of the Nephilim and Lilith. Let's see here. 836. So any comments or any anything so far about this? Y'all are just kind of listening quietly, I see. All right, let's see here. The return of the Nephilim and Lilith. All right, so as previously discussed, the return of the Nephilim after Noah's flood presents a conundrum. Remember, I've often been concerned about that. How is it there were giants after the flood? I thought all the giants were wiped out before the flood. Isn't that something? Give me a second here. All right. Let's see. It's a childhood friend texting. All right, there's Melissa. All right. All right, welcome, Melissa. Welcome. Okay, so basically we're talking about how do we explain the infestation of the giants after the flood? Because even most of your pastors admit that one of the purposes of the flood was to wipe out all the giants. Even your pastors in your mainline denomination churches. So how do we explain this defilement after the flood? So this goes on to explain that how could that dread race return if both Genesis and First Enoch makes it clear that the deluge destroyed all men not aboard the ark, and that before the flood, Yahweh imprisoned all the watchers. Well, actually, he's not quite correct there. Yahweh did not imprison all the watchers. He imprisoned 90-some% of them. How do we know this? Because the book of Jubilees recounts a discussion that Satan has at the throne of Elohim in heaven. And he says, look, if you imprison all my demons that are under my domain, then who's going to punish the children of men when they depart from your commandments? And so in this discussion, Yahweh relents and he says to Satan, okay, you can keep a very small percentage of demons roaming about the earth. So that's where the understanding of demons come from, okay? Because all of these, remember that in these giants, there was a spirit, but it was an impure spirit. It was a demon spirit. And so they had to be locked below in hell. But some of them were still allowed to roam on the earth to torment the children of men who violated Almighty Yah's commandments. Okay, so some scholars, let's see here. Some scholars explain the Nephilim's return by proposing that a new group of angels fell to earth and had sexual relations with women. I think probably that's not really, I really wouldn't hedge my bet on that theory, because the Bible nowhere says this. However, no ancient sources speak of such a momentous event. Instead, both Genesis and First Enoch indicate that Noah and his sons sired the post-flood Nephilim through normal sexual relations. First Enoch flatly states that Noah and his sons sired the post-flood giants through the flesh. Genesis links the return of the Nephilim to the birth of Canaan, a son of Ham. The post-flood propagation of the Nephilim lineage through normal sexual relations leads to a nearly inconceivable conclusion. Someone aboard the ark carried that dread defilement. So somebody, so let me just save you the trouble. And this is, I think, was where he's going in this. What he's saying is that Ham's wife, Naamah, still had some of that defiling fallen angel mixed with human women lineage in her. And that's how it manifested again. Okay, I think that's where he's going with this. At first blush, it might seem impossible to identify who aboard the ark might have carried the Nephilim lineage, but a little logical deduction quickly narrows the candidates. We can promptly dismiss Noah as the source. Yahweh's entire mission to the flood was to scrub the earth of the Nephilim defilement, leaving only Noah's pure lineage after the deluge. Indeed, Genesis 6:9 states that Noah was perfect in his generations, meaning his fathering lineage was undefiled, and 1 Enoch relates that Noah was of divine spirit. We can further dismiss both Noah and his wife as the source of the defilement, because if either lineage were defiled, then all of Noah's sons would have been defiled. Thus, all the post-flood mankind would be defiled. In turn, we can then eliminate Noah's sons, as they were the product of Noah and his wife. This leaves only the 3 wives of Noah's sons as the possible source of the post-flood Nephilim defilement. The Bible documents precious little concerning these women. Their names and lineages are not mentioned. However, the evidence points to Ham's wife as the source of defilement. This is because all the post-flood Gibborim, that would be mighty men, and Nephilim tribes appear to be descendants of Ham's wife. Furthermore, have you ever wondered about this? Let me just throw this in here. I'm going to throw this in here. So think about this. I don't lose my place. Think about this. How many of you guys have ever seen, you're kind of scrolling through YouTube, you're scrolling through the videos on Facebook, and you see Bigfoot videos. And then you see the recreation of what Bigfoot might looked at like. And one thing I notice about all of them, they have very dark pigmentation. They're very dark skinned. Now, unless you are of the Black Hebrew Israelites, unless you are of them, who believe that the darker pigmentation, the black people come from Shem, which I don't subscribe to there. I think that's incorrect. The book of Jasher seems to indicate that Shem was more of like the fairer skin color. Now, I'm not trying to bring any kind of racist ideology here, so please don't mistake me. Don't mistake me in this. But I just find it interesting that when you think about these Gibborim and these Nephilim, which are these giants, and then you think about even today what is considered as like many people consider like Bigfoot creatures to be remnants of the Nephilim, roaming around these still these very barren places in the deep forest. I'm not saying that I believe in Bigfoot necessarily, although I don't discount it. But have you ever noticed how they are? Have you ever noticed how they are basically very dark pigmentation, very dark hair, very dark pigmentation, very interesting. So basically, that is yeah, Vicky, they're in another dimension. Yeah, that's an interesting comment there. Okay, so that's just something to think about here. Okay, guys. So basically what they're saying here is, how did the giants somehow end up after the flood? And if you do a process of deduction, then you can narrow it down to Ham's wife. Now, some resources, like the book of Jasher, say that his wife was named Naamah. You ever seen that? Naamah is his wife. Furthermore, as we shall see, Genesis 9 establishes the Canaanites, a source of the most prominent Gibborim in the post-flood world, as arising from an adulterous encounter between Noah and Ham's wife. Now, this is actually, there's many denominations that teach this. They teach that the reason why, in Genesis, is a very cryptic story about how Shem and oh, help me out. What's the other son that Noah had? Japheth. How they took a covering and they covered Noah's naked body. He had gotten drunk. But Noah, when he got up and he discovered what had happened, he cursed Ham and cursed his descendant. And turns out that Canaan was cursed. Well, is it true that Noah, out of his mind in a drunken stupor, here he was naked? Is it possible that Naamah basically fornicated with Noah and produced this? This is the idea. This is how it's explained. Okay, so just something to consider. All right, so basically, and it also gives reason to why Yahweh wanted the chosen seed to wipe out all the seed of Canaan. Remember, and how, the entire Exodus, and how Joshua was, commanded to go in little by little, conquer Canaan land. And we read all about that in the book of Joshua. All right. So in this encounter, Noah gets drunk, uncovers his nakedness with Ham's wife. Now, when the Bible uses this terminology, it means have sexual relations. He therefore conceives Canaan, the father of the Canaanites. All the post-flood Nephilim tribes of giants dwell in the land of the Canaanites. Did you know that? They're all localized in that area. If we read the narrative of 1st and 2nd Samuel, David's mighty men are credited with wiping them out. And they were all in Canaan land. Okay, so he thereby conceives Canaan, the father of the Canaanites. All the post-flood Nephilim tribes of giants dwell in the land of the Canaanites, apparently arising out of their ranks. Vicky, go ahead.
I thought that uncovering your father's nakedness or your mother's nakedness would refer to Noah's wife. Noah's wife is Noah's nakedness. I was always under just from reading in other places where it talks about your father's nakedness, your mother's nakedness. So I guess I was always kind of under the impression that Ham had slept with Noah's wife. And I'm
Okay,
not.
okay. Yeah, I hear what you're saying, because it says.
And I'm not necessarily thinking too that Noah's wife is necessarily his mother. Not necessarily, because she's never spoken of as, not that she's mentioned a great deal, but it never mentions that she is their mother. She's always referred to as Noah's wife.
Yeah.
That's just something that I've noticed. I'm not.
Yeah, that's interesting, because so then, there are some commentaries that say that that maybe it was Ham having relations with Noah's wife, and that this produced Canaan. This produced Canaan. But the problem you run into with that theory is you are saying essentially, you're saying essentially that in Noah's lineage is it's connected to the idea that somehow the Nephilim seed got in after the flood. So in that theory, how did the Nephilim seed get in after the flood?
Well, see, that it would make sense with what I'm saying, because if she was his wife, but if she was not their mother, if their mother died or whatever, and then he married somebody else, his lineage would still be pure through the three sons' mother.
Right, but
you see what I'm saying?
But would Noah have been regarded perfect in all his ways if he had married a woman who was not vetted as truly a daughter of Adam?
Yeah, that's a good point. But he was regarded as perfect in his generations.
Right.
Which some people say he's perfect in his DNA. He's perfect, and he was not corrupted in any way.
Right. And that's why it's believed that it's more likely that this was Ham's wife.
Right.
Interestingly,
and that makes sense too. I just noticed that I just was wondering about their father's nakedness.
Because remember that the wives of the sons came from outside.
Right.
Now, apparently 2 of them had no judgment regarded upon their descendants, but upon this instance, judgment was pronounced upon it. Melissa, you got a comment?
Oh, I was just gonna say that in some of the versions where it says generations, it'll say genealogy.
Mhm.
So I don't know if that means like, yeah, well, you know what it means.
Yeah, it means this family line essentially. Yeah. Thank you for those interesting comments. All right, so in this understanding, if we suggest that Noah was perfect in all his generations or his family line, yet somehow Ham must have received his wife. And it's interesting that in the movie on Noah, remember that movie? And it starred, who was that famous actor that played the guy that protects the cat?
Russell Crowe.
Who is it?
Russell Crowe played Noah.
Yeah, Russell Crowe. That's right. Remember, it actually includes this detail in
It
the
includes the Watchers. Yeah.
yeah, it includes this detail of Ham's wife, and that she is taken from these wicked people, these people that are very violent, wicked people, and very interesting thing there. Furthermore, so let's continue on here. It says, furthermore, as we shall see, Genesis 9 establishes the Canaanites the source of the most prominent Giborim in the post-flood world as arising from an adulterous encounter between Noah and Ham's wife. In this encounter, Noah gets drunk, uncovers his nakedness with Ham's wife. He thereby conceives Canaan, the father of the Canaanites. All the post-flood Nephilim tribes of giants dwell in the land of the Canaanites, apparently arising out of their ranks. If the Nephilim defilement survived across the flood, aboard the ark, it has enormous implications for Lilith. Could her particular Nephilim strain have survived? Or was it only the mundane lineage of the Watchers mating with the daughters of man that endured the deluge? Okay, so basically what we're saying is here, the entire purpose of the bitter water trial speaks of that continued infestation of Lilith, somehow through that genetic line. And it came from, in this understanding, it came from that illicit relationship between Noah, who was drunk. It seems to be a kind of a tale, doesn't it? Because isn't that the same thing that happened to Lot, except Lot had relations with his daughters? But I mean, the drunkenness part, it's a common narrative, a theme here. But when you think about it, look at the incredible destruction that both men beheld, and imagine how that would have impacted you. There's not very many people that would have had the self-control not to want to get drunk, just to forget about the horrific scene that they had encountered or had experienced. Lot had escaped a horrific thing. That's kind of a side issue here, but I thought I would make mention of just, off the top of my head. Okay, so as we shall see, there are numerous biblical hints and mystical evidences, as well as several ancient texts and legends that indicate it was indeed Lilith's particular strain that survived. From these sources, we are also able to produce a name for Ham's wife. She was Naamah, the sister of Tubal-Cain, and in the lineage of Cain, who slew Abel. Very interesting. We're going to pick this up next time, guys. Since we have just about, it's a good place to stop. We've covered our hour just about. We got a few minutes left for open discussion, but this really does have implication, because when you study this, it explains the bitter water trial. It explains the why the high priest would pronounce Le Azazel. Vicky, if you were on that boat, if you were on that smelly boat for that long, you'd want to be, well, you've been wanting a nip too. Probably, I think so. Anyway, it explains, it explains why is it that Moses made the Israelites drink that water of that ground up, golden calf. He ground it up, dumped it into the stream, made them drink out of it. It was bitter. And then many of them got sick and died from it. All of these connections we're covering in this series. And so I have found this book to be of enormous interest. because it provides an explanation. Is everything in this book the explanation? I would never be so arrogant to say that. But is it an explanation? An explanation that ties these elements together quite nicely? I say yes. I say yes. It does tie all of these elements together quite nicely. Now, what is the most, how shall we say, what's the word I'm looking for? Odious aspect of all of this. And who can tell me what the most odious aspect is of this entire topic and this entire way of looking at things from Scripture? I think right away most women could answer very quickly. They would say the very concept that Adam had a first failed wife and that Eve was another wife who was more appropriate for him, given to him and taken out of him. That's really the most odious aspect of this. And it tends to rub people the wrong way. And I think it's one of the reasons why it's not talked about a lot, because it's a very sensitive issue, because the whole concept of Adam, that there may have been a woman before Eve, that turned out to be his first failed wife. That's very difficult to consider. Go ahead, you got some hands up there, Vicky. Got a couple other hands.
I have an opinion about that.
Okay.
Because I thought about this earlier, several weeks ago. I don't think it's so much that there was like a failed wife in any way, but it seems to me, I remember thinking foundationally, it sort of implies that that Yahweh made a mistake by giving him just a failed wife.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it has
that's what it sounds like in its premise. Like, why would he do that?
Mm-hmm.
Why would he allow her to be Adam's wife? Why would he allow that?
Yeah, right. And Lori has a comment here. Difficult topic, some demonic current day are disembodied spirits versus fallen angels. She's asking a question here. Lori, I think what you're asking is, where do demons come from? And if you read the book of Enoch and Jubilees, Jasher, and all of the biblical narrative, you will see that they are the spirits of those natural aberrations, those giants. And they are intensely evil, and they are very jealous of mankind. They're jealous of the generations of the earth, which would be Adamah, the earth, from the earth, which we are from. We're from the line of Adam, okay? And that's why they want to destroy the line of Adam. Okay, so now the fallen angels, they're on a completely separate level than that. Separate levels. Some of them are locked below in chains, some of them, but some of them are still at work in the world. They are what Paul refers to as the principalities and the powers that we, one of the reasons why we are commanded to pray is because the principalities and powers are withstanding, they are withstanding us. They're trying to stop prayers from coming about. Okay. So that's important. I have something here. Yeah, plus Yeshua saying in the beginning, it was not so, mentioning that couples were meant to stay together. Yeah, good comment there. Good comment there. Who is me? That's what you've got on your Zoom. You got me. All right. I mean, if you want to keep your anonymity, but, I'm just kind of curious. Who is me on there on my list here? It just says me. Melissa, you got your hand up. Do you want to say something? Oh, that's Steve. Okay, Steve. All right. Melissa, you still got your hand up. Are you done with your hand, or did you want to say something else?
I didn't mean to leave it up, but I think that's Steve that it says me.
Okay. All right. We have another comment here. Lori says, unless divorce, not sin. Well, at Deuteronomy 24, Lori says that divorce is, although regrettable, it is a byproduct of fallen mankind. It is a byproduct, but the act of divorce is not always a sin. Understand that the act of divorce is not always a sin. Not always. And there are particular requirements found in the book of Deuteronomy 24. If you understand Deuteronomy 24 in line with what Messiah was teaching, essentially there has to be some kind of sexual impropriety. There could be witchcraft. If you're, if you marry, if a wife, if one of them is involved in witchcraft, that's serious enough thing. That would merit divorce. And so Lori also says, yeah, thank you, Vicky, permissible, not preferable. Okay, so doesn't Bible say Eve sinned first? How could Adam have a wife prior? Okay, well, remember that in the Lilith understanding, Lilith, she was, let me show you where in the Bible it's believed Lilith shows up. Okay. All right. So we're going to go to Genesis 1 here. And let's see here. Okay. So it's here. It's Genesis chapter 1. Let's see. You can find this here. Okay, it's right here. This is where the sages believe Lilith is found. So Elohim created man in his own image. In the image of Elohim created he him, male and female. It literally says they're both on the same creative order, male and female. But if you go to Genesis chapter 2, it says it's a whole different narrative. It's like Yahweh took put Adam to sleep and took the rib from Adam and made Eve. And this is why Paul references Eve as so first you've got Almighty Yah, then you've got Messiah, then you've got the man, then you've got the wife. And it says, for it was not Adam who sinned first, but the wife but Eve being led astray, sinned first. And so because of this, she has to wear a covering on her head because of the angels. It's talking about fallen angels. Now I'm getting into a whole other subject here. So if you compare this right here, let me show you something here. Let's get rid of that and open something else up. So this is
Can I make a comment about that while you are looking for your thing?
Yeah, go ahead.
I think if you look at the first part before the creation of Adam, where he talks about, the animals and everything was created. When you do get into chapter 2, there are things said like, now there was no shrub on the earth, or there was nothing that came into fruition. So, and I know a lot of people don't like that kind of philosophy, that chapter 2 is like, chapter 1 is the summation and chapter 2 goes into more detail.
Yeah, that's how they get around it. That is how the pastors get around it, because it's untenable to consider. It's a very difficult concept to even consider as reality. But look at this here. It says here, and Adam gave names to all the cattle, closed up the flesh thereof. Okay, he made a woman and brought it to man. Okay, so it says here, and Yahweh Elohim caused a deep sleep to fall upon Adam, and he slept, and he took one of his ribs, closed up the flesh instead thereof, and the rib which Yahweh Elohim had taken from man made he a woman and brought her unto the man. Okay, so when you compare the narrative to this here, this is Genesis 1. So Elohim created man in his own image. Notice this. Paul says that woman is created in the image of man, not Elohim. So how do you get around that? See, that's Because it says Elohim created man in his own image. In the image of Elohim created he him, male and female. Woman's not created in the image of Elohim. She's in the image of man. And that's what the Bible teaches. Melissa,
That's how Mary could carry Yeshua.
what's that?
That's how Mary could carry Yeshua, because she was not of the dust of the earth. She's from Adam.
Right. Right. Very good concept. I never thought of that before. That is excellent concept. Thank you. Melissa, you got your hand up again.
Yeah, I was just going to say that Andrew Gabriel Ross did a really good video about the two creation narratives.
Okay, what's his thesis? Give it to us. Give us a Cliff Note version.
Well, I know it was extremely interesting, but I don't want to say something that's wrong because it's been a long time. But I know that in the one creation, I think he's always referred to as Elohim, and then not in the other one. I don't remember how it works, but it was very, very interesting.
Oh, okay. So that's kind of a separate, it's kind of a corollary issue as, in other words, the being that created, the action of the creation. Okay.
Yeah, I guess, but he kind of acted like it was two separate events.
Okay. Well, most your entire all of Judaism believes these are two separate events that occurred here, Genesis 1 and 2. And notice Paul says that woman came from man, and man was created by Elohim. So that tracks with Genesis 2 story, but does not track with Genesis 1, where it says male and female created he them. So this is where Lilith comes in the narrative. And if you understand this narrative, it becomes more plausible. All right, guys. Any other comments before we close? We've gone an hour here, and a lot of interesting discussion, don't you think? A lot of interesting points. I appreciate all of the, it helps when we all come together and we have little elements here and there that kind of add to the picture. And I really appreciate that for myself as well. Things that I don't even think about, and it creates a nice time of study for all of us. All right, so with all of that, we will say shalom, shalom, and hopefully, I think tomorrow there's some things going on. Keep track of that on the Yahad calendar, yahadevents.com. All right, shalom, guys.